The same traveler mentions a long decree made by one of the communities in honor of its magistrates, which he found inscribed on a slab in a Turkish burying ground. The thanks of the community with a crown of olives are given as a recompense to these officers for their great liberality and trouble while in office, and to perpetuate their memory and to excite an emulation of their merit, it is besides enacted that the decrees be engraved, but at their expense. So desirable, says Chandler, was the testimony to the individuals, and so frugal the usage in bestowing it. Footnote. Ibid, Volume 1, Chapter 28, page 124. Of course, as an architectural association, the Dionysiacs used many of the implements employed by operative masons, and as a secret brotherhood, they had a system of signs and tokens by which any one of the members could make himself known to the others. Professor Robison, who may be accepted on this point as authority, admits that they were distinguished from the uninitiated or profane inhabitants by the science which they possessed, and by many private signs and tokens by which they recognized each other. Footnote. Proofs of a Conspiracy, page 20. Each of the koinya, or separate communities into which they were divided, was under the direction of officers corresponding to a master and wardens. Footnote. Brewster in Lowry's History, page 29. The Masonic principle of charity was practiced among them, and the opulent members were bound to provide for the wants and necessities of their poorer brethren. The legend which connects these architects with the building of the temple at Jerusalem assumes that Hiram Abiff was a member of this secret association. Although the scriptural narrative is adverse to this theory, since it states that he was simply a worker in metals and precious stones, yet we may reconcile it with possibility by supposing that such craftsmen were admitted into the association of the Dionysiacs because their decorative art was necessary for the completion and perfection of the temples and public buildings which they constructed. This is, however, merely conjectural. The legend, now connecting itself in part with history, proceeds to state that when Solomon was about to build a temple to Jehovah, he made his intention known to his friend and ally Hiram, king of Tyre, and because he was well aware of the architectural skill of the Tyrian Dionysiacs, he besought that monarch's assistance to enable him to carry his pious design into execution. Hiram complied with his request and sent him the necessary workmen, who by their skill and experience might supply the mechanical deficiencies and ignorance of the Israelites. With the body of builders he sent this Hiram Abiff, who as a curious and cunning workman, highly recommended by his patron, was entrusted by King Solomon with the superintendence of the construction, and placed at the head of both the Tyrian and Jewish craftsmen as the chief builder and principal conductor of the work. To this distinguished artist, on account of the large influence which his position gave him, and the exalted personal virtues which are traditionally supposed to have characterized him, is to be attributed, according to the legend, the intimate union of two peoples so dissimilar in manners and so antagonized in religion as the Jews and the Tyrians, which resulted in the organization of the institution of Freemasonry. Supposing Hiram Abiff, as the legend does, to have been connected with the Dionysiac fraternity, we may also suppose that he could not have been a very humble or inconspicuous member, if we may judge of his rank in the society from the amount of talent which he is said to have possessed, and from the elevated position that he held in the affections and at the court of the King of Tyre. He must therefore have been very familiar with all the ceremonial usages of the Dionysiac artificers, and must have enjoyed a long experience of the advantages derived from the government and discipline which they practiced in the erection of the many sacred edifices which they had constructed. A portion of these ceremonial usages and of this discipline he would naturally be inclined to introduce among the workmen at Jerusalem. He therefore united them in a society similar in many respects to that of the Dionysiac artificers. He inculcated lessons of charity and brotherly love. He established a ceremony of initiation to test experimentally the worth and fortitude of the candidate, adopted secret methods of recognition, and impressed the obligations of duty and the principles of morality by means of symbols and allegories. Just at this point, a difficulty must have arisen in reconciling the pagan symbolic instruction of the Tyrians with the religious notions of the Jews, which, however, the legend ingeniously overcomes. The most prominent symbol of speculative masonry, that indeed on which the whole of the ethical instructions is founded, is contained in the lesson of resurrection to a future life as developed in the allegorical legend of the master's degree. In the pagan mysteries, of which the Dionysia were a part, this doctrine was also illustrated by an allegorical legend. In the mysteries of Dionysus, which were practiced by the Tyrian architects, the legend related to the death and subsequent resuscitation of Bacchus or Dionysus. But it would have been utterly impossible to have introduced such a legend as the basis of any instructions to be communicated to Jewish initiates. Any allusion to the mythological fables of their Gentile neighbors would have been equally offensive to the taste and repugnant to the religious prejudices of a nation educated from generation to generation in the worship of a divine being who, they had been taught, was jealous of his prerogatives, and who had made himself known to their ancestors as the Jehovah, the only God of time, present, past, and future. The difficulty of obtaining a legend on which the dogma of the third degree might be founded was obviated by substituting Hiram Abiff after his death, at which time only the system could have been perfected, in the place of Dionysius. The lesson taught in the mysteries practiced by the Dionysiac artificers was thus translated into the Masonic initiation, the form of the symbolism remaining the same, but the circumstances of the legend necessarily varying. By this union of the Dionysiacs with the Jewish workmen and the introduction of their mystical organization, the Masonic order assumed at the building of the temple that purely speculative form connected with the operative which it has ever since retained. From its Jewish element, it derived its religious character as a pure theism. From its Tyrian element, it borrowed its peculiar mystical character and its system of symbolism, which so much assimilated it to the ancient pagan mysteries that a legend has been framed to be hereafter considered, which traces its origin directly to those secret associations of antiquity. Upon the completion of the temple, the workmen, invested with all the secrets which had been promised in their initiation, and thus becoming master masons, dispersed, that they might be enabled to extend their knowledge and to renew their labors in other lands.